pray and get started. Lord, we come to you tonight. Lord, grateful for the folks who are here, Lord, praying for those who are not, or for sickness or tiredness or whatever else is going on as they travel. Or planning, Lord, to travel. We just ask that you would watch over them all. Let them know their love, and that with you they are highly favored. Thank you for this word that we're going to go to tonight, Lord, and may you be blessed by it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. We left off in Matthew chapter 24. And we were talking here. Jesus had this is the last week of his life. He's with his disciples, and he's talked about this temple and how it would be that no stone would be left on another. And the disciples pulled him aside there on the Mount of Olives, and this is called the Olivet Discourse. Not the Sermon on the Mount, but the Olivet Discourse. And they asked him, because they associated the end of the world with the destruction of the temple. How in the world are we going to be able to last if they destroy the temple? I mean, if they tear this down, surely as large as the stones are, as fierce as we fight, as loyal as the Jews are, as powerful as God is, surely this is not going to be the end of the world. And then Jesus begins to lay out pretty much the end of the age and what they'll be looking for. And then we left off somewhere around verse 32. So that's where we'll start. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branches have already become tender and put forth leaves, you know that summer is near. You also, when you see all these things, know that it is near, even at the door. Surely I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. So when we begin to think about how Jesus is working now, these are what are called the parable of the kingdom. And when we look in the book of, in the Old Testament, we realize that the fig tree is always associated with the nation of Israel. And so he says, when you begin to see the fig tree and the branches that put forth its leaves, and you know it's beginning to blossom, know that the time is getting really close. And when did we see the nation of Israel blossom? We saw it come back into being in May the 12th, 1948. In one day, a nation was born. And Jesus says that when you saw these kind of things, you begin to think about what's going on. And he says that for as sure as my word is, these things are going to pass away, because heaven and earth would pass away, but his word would remain true. So begin to look at that. And it's interesting, he says that this generation shall not pass by. Well, we're in that generation that is seeing Israel blossom. We saw it come into being. We've seen it being fruitful. We've seen it fought some wars. We've seen it green some ground. We've seen it be able to defend itself. We've seen it be able to be an economic powerhouse. We've seen it be able to regrow a lot of fruit, becoming one of the largest flour producers for Europe, and one of the largest fruit producers for Europe. Number 3. You think, well, all that's coming out of Israel, all that desert, all that dry ground. No, this is Israel blossoming. Jesus, when you begin to see this happen, know that the time is at hand. It's even at the door. And then he begins in verse 36 saying, but of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. So you have to think about this. The Son has trusted the Father so much that the Father himself understands what's going on. Now, when we begin to open up Revelation chapter 1, we begin to see that it's quite possible that Christ has been clued in on everything, and the Father has included him. But at this time, in his incarnate state, Christ has chosen not to know the time. He didn't choose to know the hour. He just knew what it was going to look like. But he says, this is the sign, even as the days of Noah were, so will also be the coming of God. So will also be the coming of man. So I would like for you to turn over to Genesis chapter 6. And let's just look at that for a minute. And I know we've done this before, but I'm like the Apostle Peter. I'm going to remind as long as I'm in this tent to stir you up to remembrance, and it's not going to bother me to do that. It's not going to bother me to preach over something I've preached before. It may bother you. You think, well, I wish you preached something different. And I will when I get to that part that's different. Right now, I'm preaching this because we're working on the book of Revelation, and all this stuff fits together. You think, well, I don't know about all that, Brother Tony. I'm telling you, I'm talking about the last days, and I'm continually, through the Spirit of God, through His Word, trying to show you that this is a common theme throughout the Bible, that the end of the world is coming, and it's well in God's plan for it to happen just that way. And it needs to be well in your plan to take the escape route. You do not want to be left behind to go through the tribulation. You want to be part of the church. And a lot of people go through this life and they think they've got it all put together, but if we were to go through the parable of the 10 virgins, and we probably will, we'll see that you can't go on somebody else's oil. You can't go on anybody else's experience. You know the old saying that God doesn't have grandchildren, right? You can't be grandfathered in. You have to be born again by Christ. You have to be a child. We have back in the 70s and 80s, there's always we'd go to these churches and they'd always have founding members of the church there, and my mama's a thing of the church. My daddy did this church. And we got all the things marked with all the plaques, and my family did this and that. And the whole time they were doing it, I'm thinking to myself, buddy, that's not how you get the ticket to heaven. I mean, just list out a whole list of things. The church was half the size this place was, and list out all the things that all these other people have done, and missed the most important thing, what he should have done. Have you made yourself right? Have you been washed in the blood? Are you filled and anointed with God's Spirit? So anyway, so that's what that's about. So Genesis chapter 6, verse 1 says, this is what the days of Noah was like. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, the daughters were born to them, and the sons of God saw daughters of men, and they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, all whom they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive forever with man, for he is indeed flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. And there are also giants in the earth, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, they bore children, and these were the mighty men of old, men of renown. And then the Lord saw that the wickedness of men was great on the earth, and that every intent and thought of the heart was continually on evil. And the Lord was sorry that He made the earth, and He grieved it in His heart. So what all is going here? Well, first of all, we saw that it was a population explosion, right? They had went forth and they multiplied. And how they did that was they were married and given to marriage. Plenty of that going on, divorce and not worrying about it. Verse 3 talks about the strange flesh that they went over. All the things that's going on here, I don't want to get too deep into it. I've done it before, but obviously there's some kind of strange sexual thing going on. And if you don't believe that there's a lot of that strange kind of stuff going on, just turn your television on for a little bit. Right? So the earth, the people were multiplying, the sexual sins were getting worse and worse, so much so that monsters were born out of all this stuff, right? Giants in the land. The word here is Nephilim, and it don't really, the Latin word is gigantus, but it really means to fallen one. So here these monsters were born, and abominations before God. And then verse 5 says that he saw the wickedness and how great it was on the earth, that every intent and thought of this man's heart was continuing on evil. Think about how that works out. We talk about total depravity. Well, we might not talk about it a lot. But this one verse proves that man is totally depraved. Apart from God, all that he will continue to do generation after generation is devolve to his own thoughts or on selfishness, and on what he's got and how he can get it and how he can be wicked and get away with it. The whole idea here is that the earth is multiplying. The sexual sin is getting worse and worse, so much so that now there are monsters being born, and that all that man could think about was continual wickedness and evil at every thought. So I'm turning back now to Matthew chapter 24. I'm looking here, if you will, down to verses 38. He says, for as in the days before the flood. By the way, Noah was an end times believer. Anybody? God had told him to build that boat, and Noah began to build that ark. It took him 120 years plus 7 days to get it all done and get locked up in there. Noah was an end time believer. I want you to know something. I am a believer in the end of time. I don't know what I'll be part of if I'm laying down in the dust, or if I'm sitting up here in the pulpit, or I'm driving down the road. However that's going to happen, I know that Christ is coming back. This world's going to wind down, and I do not want to have any part of what happens after Christ comes and calls his church. So I'm an end time believer too. If you're sitting here, you're probably believing in the end time. I mean, because I'm constantly, for the last month and a half, every sermon on this stuff, trying to say it. So here, Noah was end time believer. Anyway, so in the day before the flood, they were eating and drinking. So they were partying and having a good time and married and giving to marriage. The idea here is again the looseness of what it was. It's more like married and marrying again. Remember, it said of all who they wanted. So we're talking about bigamy and polygamy and divorce rates that were through the roof, and even when Jesus was talking here about what Abraham did for what Moses did for the Jews, all you had to do to get unmarried in the Jewish culture was to give the wife a writ of divorce. You put it in her hand and you walk away from it, right? That's all you had to do. In the Muslim thing now, all you got to do is say 3 times that you don't want to be married to them, and they have to go on down the road. Or you swap them out with your brother. I don't know how that works, but that's how that works. It's just that there was no commitment to one another. None at all. So they were married, and also the idea of marriage is you're planning for something for the future, right? I know when we got a little picture Diane keeps on the dresser to remind me how pretty I was back in those days and how much hair I had on the day I got married to her. And I looked at it the other day really close. I said, look how pretty that little woman was. That tiny person I married, how pretty she was and small. And I'm just looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, those 2 kids didn't realize what was in front of them, but they had plans. They had plans. They were making plans, It's kind of like if you plant a garden. You plan to see it through the end. These people were married. They were making plans for the future. They had no idea it was coming. Even though Noah was preaching the end of time for them, they had no idea. They just kept on one day after the other, one foot in front of the other, not giving any thought to what the judgment that was awaiting them. Watch what it says, giving into marriage unto the day that Noah entered into the ark. Now, Noah entered into the ark, and then God waited 7 days. Remember? We talked about that. So Jesus says, and I believe what Jesus said, I think when God when all the animals got in that ark, and people stopped hearing them hammers banging, and all the planning going on, and they heard that door thump, that God shut the door, I think they started thinking, hey, this thing, what? Hey, this might be getting real. But at that point, it was too late, right? I think that's what's going to happen to a lot of people. When the church is raptured and some folks are left behind, they're going to think, hey, this thing just got real. Anyway, and did not know until the flood came and took them away, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. What's he saying here? the world is not paying attention then. It will not be paying real attention when he comes, and it'll be the farthest thing from their mind. And when it's the farthest thing in their mind, remember, Jesus says when they cry out peace and safety, then the time is at hand when they think they got everything full and they don't have to depend on God for anything. On that very day, at that very moment, when all across the world they think, hey, we got this thing together, we're going to be okay. That's when the Son of Man is coming. And then what will happen? Then two men will be in the field. One will be taking another left. What are we talking about here? I think he's talking about the rapture here. And I'll tell you why. That word taken here is used in 3 other places in the Bible. It's used over in Matthew chapter 1, Matthew chapter 3. It's used over in John 14. And Matthew chapter 1, it means to take a bride. Over in Matthew chapter 9, Matthew chapter 9, the Mount of Transfiguration, where Jesus takes Peter, James, and John with him. That word means to go up and see his glory, right? He's going to be transfigured, so he takes them to see his glory. And then over in John chapter 14 talks about he's prepared a place for us, and he's going away, and he will come back and take us to this place. The idea here is the bride going to see God's glory in heaven. So when we look at that same word and we put it here, we put that how that word works, because it's like 3 words for taken, but this particular word used 4 times counting this. It's the bride going up to see the glory in heaven. So the idea here is again the rapture coming. And it will be like 2 men are in the field, right? Both of them went to work that day. Whatever's going on, and one will be taken, the other one left, and poof, that's gone. 2 of them be grinding at the mill, right? That probably was a large millstone. Probably took 2 people to really make it work. And all of a sudden, one of them's going to be gone, the other one's going to be thinking, I wonder what this thing's so heavy to pedal for now. So he says, watch, therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. That's to be alert. The whole idea here is to be alert and to be in mind and take a sense of what he's saying and what he's doing here. Again, the whole idea is that whenever he comes, some are going to be taken, some are going to be left behind. And I don't think it's going to be a 50-50 proposition at this point, but I'm just saying that Christ says that nobody's going to know. The whole point of that is they all went to work that day. And they all dressed out. They all were out there sweating. They were all out there planning on making the end of the day. Jesus using this point of reference, probably thinking they're going to get a payday at the end. Again, remember I talked about that? All the Christians are going to be gone. And then where's all that money going to be at? The retirements, the houses, the stuff. Well, we're going to have to redistribute that, or it's going to get raided or took or robbed or whatever. And everybody's going to say, they're going to get a boom, right? All that money being passed back out or stolen or whatever. Hey, we got it. Hey, he just got an old black Toyota truck sitting over there in the yard, 4-wheel drive. And all them old knives sitting in the house. Let's go get it. Hey, he ain't going to be needed anymore. He's gone. That's gone. So they get to do all that. And, anyway, they think, again, the whole idea is, well, hey, those Christians are gone. They were always the problem. And all of a sudden it's going to get bad, and it's going to be the Jews who are going to be the problem. Always looking for somebody else to be the problem, except looking in the mirror and seeing what the real problem is. Right? I tell you, when I look in the mirror in the morning, I say, you up to no good today. Why? Because nothing good dwells in my flesh. Now, the Spirit of God's inside of me, the Word of God's inside of me, but if I'm not careful to stay in the Word of God, not careful to submit to the Spirit of God, I'm telling you, that guy in that mirror, he's my worst enemy. He's going to be the very fellow that stabs me in the back that day if I'm not careful. So anyway, verse 43. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Again, another parable. Look, if everybody knew what time it was going to happen, they would be on guard and make it out. It's like those folks that say, hey, I'm going to sow all my wild oats, and then when I get old and ain't able to do nothing, that's when I'm going to come to Christ. Well, you keep sowing them wild oats, you may not make it to a ripe old age. And then you may be set in your ways so much that the Spirit of God is not striving with you anymore. You may have rejected His call so much that there is no call. And you're just mad at God all the time. But here's the opportunity that Christ says, you know, if you had an idea of what was really going on, if you were really alert, really paying attention, looking at the signs that He's talking about, and we talked about that the other night, about the wars and rumors and wars and kingdoms and nations and all of this stuff. If you're really paying attention to that, you know that the time is at hand and you need to be getting your house in order. Verse 44. Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming in an hour you do not expect. Now you have to appreciate that, right? There have been people all over time and space trying to figure out when this was going to happen. And Jesus said, no man knows the hour. I've always thought if somebody were to figure out what hour it is, he'd move it up immediately. You know, hey, just so you wouldn't know. Just so you wouldn't know. Now you do that. Then he talks about the faithful servant and the evil servant. Again, applying another kingdom parable here. Who then is faithful and wise servant, who his master may rule over his household to give them food in due season? Blessed is the servant who his master, when he comes, finds doing so. Surely I say to you that he will make him ruler over all of his goods. But if the evil servant says in his heart, my master is delayed in his coming, and beats his fellow servants, and eats and drinks and with the drunkards, the master of the servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and an hour he is not aware of, and will cut him in two, and appoint his portion with the hypocrites, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That sounds really tough, don't it? So, who is the faithful master? Who's this faithful and wise master here? The master, of course, is Christ. Faithful and wise servant is the one who does what Christ says. God's put us and give us stewardship, right? He intends for us to do with our talents, with our hearts, with our money, with our gifts. What He intends for us to do, He intends for us to be good stewards. So much so that we're able to provide for other people with our talent. That we're able to bless them, right? That in due season, that food will be given to all of them. I mean, we're not just to sit here and soak it up. We're not some kind of depository where people just keep dumping stuff in and it never gets paid out. No, we're standing up on the spigot where the lessons come out, and we're to put that stuff out. We're not sponges. We're faucets. We're out there trying to give that back. So here, a short snap servant, somebody who's faithful, somebody who's doing right, somebody who's following after the master, they're going to be doing right when Christ comes, and He's going to be a blessing to Christ. It's going to be a blessing to everyone who's around them. But there are some folks who say, yeah, my master's not coming back. Yeah, this place is as good as mine. Good as mine. You ever seen an old dog, you know, when he's a puppy, he just kind of keeps his place, but the older he gets, the more he tries to sit where you sit. Anybody? And pretty soon, if you're not careful, that old dog thinks that chair that's been yours all this time is his chair, and when you say, you need to get out of here, he just looks at you and says, what? You know, this is that. They got so comfortable with the fact that they don't think anybody's watching or anybody's coming back. They just go about doing what they want to do. And Jesus says, at the very point when they think that they got it whooped, that's when they're coming back and they're going to be called into account. And what a terrible account. I mean, Christ says this. I mean, He could have just said, an hour that He's not aware of, and take His keys back. An hour that He's not aware of, and put him back out in the field and make him work every day. No. He said, no, that's not what He says. He says, and cut him in two. Appoint him his portion with the hypocrites.